So I've recently just been working with a client, and he's going through an interesting topic of boundaries. So first of all, we did this really cool breakthrough where he was able to see his significance or importance, because he's kind of like the classic guy that is not aware of his importance or specialness, probably like a lot of the people listening to this actually, but is much more kind of like, let me put the needs of others first. Let me put the value of the group. I want to make sure other people are taken care of too, which is a great, really, really great motivation to have. But when it came to actually seeing his own value and taking up space and not shrinking in the space of others, it wasn't around anyone. It was actually around people that he respected and friends. And actually, when he was in social situations, like he was with his girlfriend, going to like one of his funny things that he likes to do on his time off is like go to like a rave or something, you know, and like work hard, play hard, that kind of thing. And when he's in those kind of social situations with his girlfriend, socializing with other people, maybe people coming in and trying to act a bit boisterous in a bit more of a chaotic environment, he's totally fine there. When it came to people he respected and friends, that's when it was harder for him to see. So that broke through. We're working on that. He was able to tap into that. And naturally, what obviously happens from this, as you know, is you start setting boundaries. You start having your values being pushed out, not in a pushy way, but in a way, this is my expectations. This is where I want to be. This is like my boundary. And the big thing that we worked on, or the big thing that he was struggling with, was actually setting boundaries with one of his mentors. So, just like a quick kind of overview is he's like pretty big in the fitness space. I won't say who it is, obviously, because of client confidentiality. And a big part of him becoming big in this space is obviously because he has a good physique. People like listening to him. He's kind of got that older brother kind of vibe. But also his mentor was a big mentor in the fitness space and is kind of known for like having a really rigorous scientific step-by-step system, which he taught to my
Mm.
client. And my client has his own spin on, basically. And, they had all these fights with like brand deals and all this kind of stuff. And they had to go on their own because they didn't have any more brand deals to give them money and that kind of support them. And what started off was a venture between three people that was a joint partnership. One person started to become the boss, basically, even though it was never said. And everyone else is kind of being treated as employees, even though that wasn't what they originally signed up for. And it's been happening for such a long time that my client's like, I want to do something on my own. But he felt like he owed this person something, like guilty. Also, this other person doesn't really have too many like friends or doesn't really speak to his family. To which I said, like, there's a reason for that. That doesn't happen out of nowhere, right? Just because there's like certain uncalibrated things he would do. And it was really hard for him to see that this is a boundary that he could set, and he felt powerful enough to set. Now, after this call, I'm glad to say that he is able to do that. He's going to send me an update later this week about how it went. But I was wondering what your opinion is on this situation when it comes to setting boundaries, not even to people who are actively disrespecting you and walking over you, because I think that's kind of a topic for another day. But actually, people, this idea of owing something to someone or actually
Mm.
putting someone on a pedestal, because that's what it was. When you put someone on the pedestal, you are giving somebody the right to look down on you, the right to speak down at you. Doesn't mean that you don't have respect for someone who deserves it. That's very different to putting someone on a pedestal. And I would say
Mm.
the reason why I brought this up is because a lot of people struggle with this. Oh, but like I do owe this person a lot, or I do have a lot of respect for this person. I do want to give this person his laurels. What I say to that straight away
Yeah,
is you can do all of that. It's got nothing to do with a pedestal.
yeah. I'm just curious, and before I actually kind of go down this rabbit hole,
Yeah,
you mentioned there was the guilt, there was the owing, and when he
yeah.
was coming into his power. What was the internal world like, kind of at the end of the session when he felt ready to go and set the boundary? What was the experience? What changed around that owing and the guilt? That would be my curiosity a little bit.
What changed around it was, I think, seeing like the reality. Like, yes, like that helped a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you only owe something to someone, or like you can owe something to someone, but it doesn't have to be out of guilt. It doesn't have to be
Mm,
out of like that emotional pressuring. It can be out of, oh, like this person helped me out a lot. I want to help them out a lot too. And here's like the thing that really broke through for him. If the other person expects you to owe them in that kind of guilty, heavy way, then the reason they gave you that thing is not actually out of love, for lack of a better word.
yeah.
It wasn't out of the goodness of their heart. It was because they wanted to have something on you. In which
Yeah.
case, that person, in my personal value system, foregoes anything that I owe them because they weren't upfront and they were sneaky and they were dishonest. And obviously, we can have a conversation about that with that person if it is necessary. But I think that was the thing that really broke through for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing that he was able to just see the reality
Mm,
and not hold on to that kind of old guilt and give that power away. Because I think that seems like the key to it in those situations, whether it's the more aggressive situations we'll maybe talk about another time,
mm,
but these situations where there's that owing, that guilt, whatever it might be, it often feels like we're giving away our power
mm,
because there's something inside of us that they're kind of touching unconsciously
mm,
and they're kind of getting in. And because of that, we feel powerless because we're navigating this collapse that seems to arise often from guilt, often from shame, or feeling, like you said, like we owe someone, like we must do this for them. And so, in a other situation, we might normally have boundaries. We might be a strong person, might be a great communicator, but in this situation, we just fall into that collapse because of this guilt that we've taken on
mm.
for whatever reason,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then I think you were describing it beautifully, like the healthy reciprocity is someone might give to me and care for me, and I'm organically, not even really from a should frame, but just organically going to most likely want to do something similar for them as well, right?
mm,
To my capacity, because my capacity may be higher or lower than theirs, and it doesn't have to look the same
mm,
as well. But when we're stuck in the owing and the guilt, often it's really, really hard.
yeah,
And one thing I've noticed it in myself, but in clients, is there seems to be a moral quality to it.
mm,
And like kind of worried about, I don't want to be selfish, I don't want to be
yeah,
immoral, don't want to be unethical.
yeah,
And we're arguing in ourselves, and then we're looking for almost permission outside of us to allow us to do what we want to do, whatever it may be, right? To allow us to start a business, like in this situation.
yeah,
And one thing that I was playing with actually, I reflected in some clients, reflected in myself, is sometimes we take on even that very rigid right or wrong system for ethics as we're growing up. Like it's just useful when you're a child and you just got a very more concrete mind. This is right, this is wrong. But almost as we evolve, that system of morality of right and wrong is kind of inflexible.
mm,
And so when we're met with these complex issues, it's actually kind of hard to hold back because it's almost like a blanket
mm,
being put over this canvas with so much color. And we're trying to navigate it, but we just don't really have the right tool.
yeah,
And I know with the help of, our mentor who talked about the integral worldview of good for me, good for myself, good for the planet as a whole, good for the universe, right?
yeah,
Good even beyond that.
yeah,
And I noticed that actually, in many ways, dropping away that guilt and trying to judge myself through the right or wrong, kind of, am
mm,
I good or should I be punished almost?
yeah,
That next worldview emerged quite organically,
yeah,
which was much easier to fit in. Because even in this situation, if we hold the perspective, is it good for me? Is it good for them? Is it good for any third parties involved? Is it good for the world as a whole? That's a much more flexible system. And it
Mm,
starts for, is it good for me? And the answer probably in this situation would be no. And in that
yeah,
case, it really just, we kind of like fallen at the first hurdle, which means we probably shouldn't continue,
yeah.
you know? I'm curious if anything's arising for you as I'm sharing this.
Yeah, I want you to go deeper into that good for me, good for you, good for the world framework. Because for me, whenever I bring that into any kind of morality issue, like, does this make me a bad person? Am I a good person? Whenever there's a judgment of it's not worth, it's not value, it's like my actual moral quality. Bit of a side note, just because it came up. I'm actually working on a test which will give people like their shadow archetypes. And this is really powerful in
Mm,
one of the shadow archetypes, like really being driven by like morality of like what's right versus what's wrong. But we have all of that, the archetypes in us, right? Because obviously we're
yeah.
humans and we're infinitely complex. But when it comes to like this kind of a sticky issue, because there's so much like stickiness to it. When it's like value or worth, it's kind of like I don't know how to describe it, but it kind of makes you feel bad in like a worthless way. When it comes to any kind of like morality, it's like, oh, like I might actually be like an evil person. And that has a whole different weight to it,
Mm,
something like that. So can you go into more about how you deal with good for me, good for the world, good for you, and good for the world? Just maybe in terms of like when you taught clients that framework, how does it change for them? How did it change for
mm,
you as well? Because maybe that worldview might not organically open up for someone, but actually maybe even using a bit of top down, using a bit of just like, here's the framework, start to evaluate decisions through that
yeah.
can also have a big effect.
Yeah, absolutely. First thing, that sounds really cool. I'm excited for when that comes out. We definitely have to talk through it when you're able to finish
Yeah,
developing that.
yeah.
And what arises for me, if even bringing that shadow archetype, which you described, I think there seems to be two parts because we have the model of good for me, good for the other person, good for any third parties involved, good for um, humanity, the planet, and the universe, and we just keep going out from there. So we have
Mm,
this beautiful model, which is really, really effective. But then if we're not cleaned up and we're coming from this other shadow archetype, we're probably not going to hear that,
yeah.
because even that's going to start becoming a moral judgment of, are we evil, are we bad? And often, I mean, we can see it in societies, right? Developmentally, that societies that you might see as in early developmental levels, punishment is really harsh, you know? And I remember
Yeah.
Terry O'Fallon, who spoke about the stages motto, would speak about 2.0 children, would often be like, he took my pen, he should be like thrown out of a window, right? The idea of punishment was like way off. There was
Kids are
no
brutal.
2.5 kind of
Yeah.
the punishment fits the crime kind of
Yeah.
thing that emerges,
Mm.
right? And so it would just be these crazy punishments, and you can see it in some societies where you do
It's like an
something
eye for
wrong,
an
and it's
eye,
like,
right? A tooth for a
yeah,
tooth. But even that's
it's
like a developmental
that's
level
kind of more
above, isn't it?
2.5. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Like the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth is kind of 2.5. I mean,
Yeah.
but then the 2.0 would be like, you take my eye, I take your entire family, city,
Yeah.
like everything,
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Yeah.
so drastically different. But then the 2.5 is still that punishment, kind of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, but it's just a little bit more kind of, you did this bad thing, so we're going to do an equally bad thing to you.
Mm.
But then as we evolve, it seems like people get away from the punishment. For personal perspective, it's more about rehabilitation, helping them grow and evolve as a human,
Yeah.
and actually come into society. But then if we look at that within ourselves, like where are we being super harsh on ourselves? Where are we just punishing
Mm.
ourselves for just
I like that.
existing? You
Yeah.
know, even the idea of selfishness. We're a
Mm.
little selfish sometimes, and
Yeah.
sometimes we're healthy selfish, which is fine, and sometimes we're unhealthy selfish, and we're
Yeah.
just being a bit of a dick.
Yeah.
But holding real judgment and punishment for ourselves doesn't really change anything. Like that doesn't
Mm.
actually help us not
No.
do that.
Do you
It
know,
kind of just shames us.
like, sorry to interrupt, but do you know what that actually makes me think about is a lot of the time if we're trying to set our boundaries and the other person reacts negatively, that it's not meant the negatively, them responding negatively that affects us so much. It's the fact that we already were judging ourselves super harsh to begin with, and then that negativity is hitting
Yeah,
that harshness internally. So it's like the external trigger, but internally we were already judging ourselves. We're already like, oh, is this the right thing to do? And as soon as somebody voices that shadow concern, that shadow archetype, if we want to use that language, then
mm,
that's like a massive cascade. And I've done this so many times.
yeah,
I'm definitely much more agreeable. I'm much more tuned into other people's feelings than myself. And my path of integration was to tune into myself a bit more, basically be a bit more selfish and be a bit okay with that. And
yeah,
this was the biggest thing. Like when people are setting boundaries,
mm,
it's not the other person's reaction. If you were 100% secure in yourself, also secure in the sense that when you set boundaries and when you just do something, you are going to make mistakes, and that's okay too. And I'm more than happy to apologize.
yeah,
When you're secure with that too, somebody just kind of like reactively, unconsciously being like trying to shame you for those boundaries is not going to affect you. It might affect you because maybe you see a side of this person that you've never seen before, and that's quite surprising and shocking. And maybe there's some innocence that's gone, or maybe even they've shown you a shadow side which you've never seen before, and that can take some time to get accustomed for. And that's also an opportunity for us to practice the unconditional loving witness. Because if you're judging
yeah,
that in someone else, you're also judging that in yourself. Most
mm,
likely. Obviously, there's always exceptions. But when it comes to setting boundaries, it's actually the insecurity within yourself, which is the main thing, that judgment that you're talking about, those parts where we're really harsh on ourselves, rather than actually someone externally being really harsh. Like, I'll put it like this.
yeah,
If a stranger just suddenly starts being really harsh to you, like the actual aggression of it might bother you if you have issues with aggression. If you don't have issues with aggression or just people being disagreeable, you'll just be like, what's this guy talking about? Like,
yeah,
he doesn't, because it doesn't have any significance to you, it doesn't have any bite. So it's not the
mm,
external factor of somebody pushing back on you or judging you that's the problem. It's the fact that you already have buy-in that this is something to be judged.
absolutely. And it's that thing of like they made me feel so bad, but it's really like actually
Yeah,
I just made myself feel really bad. They
yeah,
were just the catalyst that triggered that.
yeah. I already felt bad
And
about it. Yeah,
yeah, like I already had that was already a sensitive topic for me, and they just kind of gave me permission to beat myself up about it a little bit.
yeah,
And I think what's so beautiful is when we're able to get really cleaned up here and kind of our internal world moves into just unconditional love and acceptance in a sense of we're accepted how we are, yet not acceptance of every behavior is like perfect and okay and shouldn't
yeah,
change, you
yeah,
know. But when we're able to do that, I think it helps us with a model, this integral worldview where we're like, is it good for me? Yeah. Is it good for Aaron?
mm,
Yeah. Is it good for the listeners? Yeah, it's really good for them. Is it good for humanity? Probably. Is it good for the planet? Oh, do we have a problem there? Like then you can get
yeah,
really curious about it and you're operating with curiosity.
mm,
And also I find, and I'm curious to hear your perspective of this, the parts involved in your internal community, when you're operating from that place, are not being defensive. Because you're not about to
mm,
put the hammer down on them if
yeah,
they've been a little bit naughty and made a bit
yeah,
of a mistake or a
yeah,
little bit mean to someone.
mm,
You're just gonna be like, all right, bud,
yeah,
we know what you did. He's like, yeah, sorry guys, yeah, that's my bad. And they're accepted and loved in this internal community. That's not gonna be judgmental or harsh to them or call them bad or evil.
mm,
And then they're able to mature and grow. And even if they aren't, because some parts just are a little bit less mature, and that's
yeah,
okay for them, we can take the responsibilities that they might have taken. Like a 1.5 part probably shouldn't be in charge of my relationship. So
yeah,
maybe we just take that from him and be like, all right, bud, you just do that, play with your toys, just
yeah, You
do
do your
whatever you want to
thing.
do, and we're gonna,
Yeah,
yeah, you do your thing, and we'll take the relationship stuff onto the other guys. We'll sort that out. And he's like, all right, cool, good,
yeah,
sorted.
yeah.
But that seems to let us access these models in a way that actually works instead of operating from a lens of judgment
Hmm.
and punishment.
Yeah. What I would say, that reminds me of another story of if we started this talk off with external boundaries. Well, how you set internal boundaries is the same thing. And why might you need to set internal boundaries? Burnout, procrastination, not asking for what you want, not taking up space, not having confidence, not having self-esteem, any of these issues means obviously we can get to the root of it and we can heal that. That's like the bread and butter of what me and Cameron are doing. But even if we didn't do that, you can still have an insecurity and not let it affect you, right? This is actually the most practical thing which I see for people that, because Cameron knows as well as I do, sometimes beliefs just take a bit of time, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes you need like a short-term solution that's still good for the medium and the long term because you need to get this stuff figured out
Yeah.
now. You need to ask your boss for a raise now. You need to get working on your side hustle now. You need to stop getting burnt out now. You need to stop procrastinating now, right? And actually, how you do that is by setting internal boundaries, right? And it reminds me of the story that I was going to tell is I had one client who's like very, or I'm still working with him, very advanced, but very much focused on his introspective internal journey. You know, he exited software, didn't have to work for a few years, had done reparenting, been to India, been to the ashrams, you know, that kind of spiritual pilgrimage, was able to support all of that without having to work. But it kind of ended with him, his money kind of dwindling out and living with his parents, and he didn't really know what to do. And it's because he had like an incessant voice that was always like, I need to really understand this first, and it needs to feel really aligned first before I can do something. And this was something which we've been directly and indirectly working on, like for since the start, basically. But he had other kind of issues that occupied him. But the biggest shift came when realizing that you didn't have to listen to that voice. That voice can still be there, and really what it is an integrated part and kind of an insecurity about not knowing enough and using intellectualization as a way to kind of take responsibility off of himself. I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but that's basically the main thing. Basically, where you have to try and understand something, and it's that understanding is never enough, and it stops you from actually doing the thing and failing and taking the messy first step. So it's about setting a boundary. Hey, you've been talking too much. You are not the only one here. I love you and I accept you, but you are not returning the favor to the rest of me. Because as soon as he was able to do that, he was able to see that there were so many other voices inside of him that were like, let's just go out there and actually take action. You know? Now, what that looked like was him founding his own business, and now he's location independent, not living with his parents anymore, and working on the next best thing, probably working on his business for the next 10, 20, 30 years, because it's really aligned with what he wants
Mm.
to do, at least for now, right? That's the
Yeah.
power of setting an internal boundary
Mm.
between, like, I have to really get to the root of his insecurity, because sometimes that can also be a distraction, right? Versus, yeah, we can do that, and we're definitely going to do that. But that doesn't mean that we're powerless to do anything until then. I wonder if that
Mm.
sparks any stories for you.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what it sparks in me is celebration, because that's often such an area
Mm,
where so many people struggle.
yeah,
I'm absolutely guilty of it.
yeah,
Um, I don't know about you, but I'm sure you've had, curiosities there. And sometimes, especially as you go deeper in this kind of work and you're actually getting success, where you're actually liberating things and actually changing your perspective and your worldview, it can be addictive and almost comfortable, or even there can be a co-opted shadow that like uses it, this idea of fixing yourself to
mm,
just keep diving in, diving in, diving in to an incessant point, but you never even experience the fruits and the enjoyment and the light that's already there. And you don't even grow that. And I think that's such a great example of it. It's probably come up the most where I've had to help clients and myself, because this was something I went through, have an understanding, and from that understanding, set a boundary to what we're doing here. That we're not just here to fix something. Right? We
Mm,
can get curious even about that construct to begin with and even work there. But before we do that, what if we have an understanding that, at least in this is the content, this is the content of what we're speaking about, but obviously this is the process. Anyway, and we get the understanding that we want the light here. That's why we're doing the shadow work, right? We want the light, the treasure, and we want to grow that, use that, and we want to live in it.
mm,
And a way to do that, and a big part of that is celebrating it when it's here. And when we have that understanding, we can allow for the widest parts of us to carry that understanding
mm,
and start to bring it into our internal community
yeah.
as a value. In the same way, we also, your story was like the value is we actually need money to survive and we want freedom, right?
Mm.
And not necessarily survival in that situation because there wasn't really that on the table, but there was a freedom thing,
It's more like I
right?
need money
Of,
in order to actually live,
yeah, I live
kind of like that.
on
Yeah.
my own,
Yeah,
support
exactly.
myself kind of thing, right? And and that's an incredibly important thing. And it gives you, if we just think of a slightly longer term perspective, it gives you leverage, probably
Mm,
now that he's done that, that he can
yeah.
actually have more time devoted to this
Mm,
from a safer, more robust place externally, which is super important,
yeah.
right? It's like when people come to us and they can't really, like, it's too much of a stretch for them. We both go, you know what, I appreciate you, but maybe go in this direction for now. And when you're in a
Yeah.
place where this is really comfortable, do the work here because we don't want to rush things
Mm,
and really push it because money externally is a real problem,
yeah.
right? But if we come back to the celebration example, there's this value that we can hold and we can be like, yeah, I know you want to fix that. I know how cleverly you're seeing that that's constructed and we can go to the base and we can liberate it. Absolutely great work. But hold on. What about the celebration? And we might get it on our side. If it's a split ego, we can integrate. But it might just be a little bit, like you said, sometimes things take time and
Mm,
it's just a little bit rigid and it's thinking, it's like, no, no, we have to do it. We have to do it. And you go, all right, I hear you. And I think that's something that mirrors external boundaries.
mm,
We don't need them to fully understand for us to set a boundary.
yeah, not at all.
We can be like, hey, listen, I know you don't fully understand this. I know you want to fix the next thing and the next thing, and you think that's the
Hmm.
best thing to do. I get it. But actually, we're going to liberate more. We're going to live in more light and more celebration, and we're going to do better work if we give time to really celebrate this light work and really be with that. And you don't have to understand that, but I'm telling you,
Mm,
you're going to have to a little less power now. You're going to come together when we're doing the shadow work. But when we're not doing it, we're going to be living the light. And we as a community are going to be doing that. If you want to be part of it, great. But if you're going to keep getting in the way of that, you're going
mm,
to stay there for now. All right.
yeah. Yeah.
And they might say, no, no, no. And you might say, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're there for now, you
Yeah.
know?
Exactly. And you can do that. If you're struggling doing that, it's because you're falling into the misconception that this part's power is more powerful than you. This part is a part of you. That means its power is your power. So you take it back. You take back the empowerment, basically,
Yeah.
because that gives you the opportunity to be like, no. Now, the reason why subconsciously a lot of people don't do that is because it means then they have to take the responsibility for where they are in whatever that is, which is something that
Mm.
comes, but you take the responsibility back with empowerment. It's not just the weight of responsibility. You take the weight of responsibility with the strength to be able to hold that. And that strength is more than enough most of the time. Um, what was I going to? I was going to say something around. setting boundaries. Oh, this is also important to notice, to note. If this is like an area to work on, it means that the first times you set this is going to be the most difficult and it gets much easier afterwards because you've already built
Yeah.
an identity or relationship with people where people just aren't accustomed to that. Now, if you're around good friends and family, then they'll respect it, but it will still have like a getting used to it period, essentially, because you're doing something which they're not accustomed to. And that can be more challenging in the beginning, but something which I found that was really helpful, like I just said, is remember that it only gets easier because then suddenly your relationship role changes over time and people treat you differently because you're conditioning them to treat you differently, essentially.
Mm,
So like this, if at the start it's really tough and it's really grindy and it's really like finicky, then that's okay because it only gets easier. This is not like how life is from now on.
yeah.
And if it is like that, it's because there's probably a limiting belief there, or some kind of
Mm,
lack of empowerment, or maybe there's uh, I don't want to say self-sabotage, but there's a part which is kind of fighting against you, in which case you would need to go and heal the root cause of that.
yeah. Also, I would say, and I'm curious your perspective, but it seems like you get to be more flexible with how you're doing it.
Mm,
It's almost like a spectrum.
yeah.
There are some places where you might be more collaborative. You're still going to hold a real strong boundary, but you can do it in a little bit more of a collaborative way. You might explain it a little more because you're in a reciprocal environment where
Mm,
they're going to hear you, they're going to understand that, and actually it's going to help them respect your boundary more. But
mm,
then on the opposite end of the spectrum, where someone's just in that 1.5, I want this, and they
yeah.
might use reciprocal language of fairness
Yeah.
and equality, and you're
Yeah.
not being nice, and they'll use any tool, but you'll feel the energy. They're not actually being reciprocal,
Yeah.
right? They're just using that language. And in those situations, it's a very non-collaborative process, and that's completely okay. You might just go, no, no,
Yeah.
I'm not explaining it. You
Yeah.
can ask for explanation, but you're not getting one.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And you might have to say no, 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 and
Yeah.
you keep saying no, and it's going to feel a real pain and really annoying.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's what's necessary for those people because they're just operating at that stage
Yeah.
in that moment.
They can't help it. That's like another story is a client. She has like okay, I guess you could call like an overbearing father and a mum that really plays the supplicating role. And when I say overbearing
Mm,
father, most likely if he's not a narcissist, he probably has narcissistic tendencies. And the problem she kept falling into with boundaries was like having to explain herself and then like the father would always get one over her, basically. Like, oh, I see, this actually
yeah.
doesn't make sense, right? If at every single conversation you arrive at the conclusion that, oh, I'm actually totally wrong and this other person is always right, that right there tells you nothing is ever 100%, right? Especially if the other person can
Yeah.
never really admit their faults, right? That's how it's a kind of telltale situation where people have learned that if they use the fairness language, they get a more favorable response. A
Mm,
really easy test is you use the fairness language back to them. And if they're able to hear
yeah.
that, then it shows, oh, maybe they are actually being reciprocal. But if they're not and they're always trying to say, oh, no, this isn't actually fair, right? My point of view is actually right. That's when you can be like, you can literally call it out and you can be, I actually don't think you are being very fair here because it just seems to
Yeah.
be your perspective that's being shared and mine isn't getting any kind of a look in. And if you say, oh, it's just because I'm your father and I know better, I know a lot of stupid fathers out there. You know, that's my own language. I wouldn't expect someone to copy that explicitly, but it's kind of a funny way to take people out of it. Well, if you use that in that scenario, it will not be funny. The other person will get pissed off, but that's kind of just what
Yeah.
I would do in that situation. But I'm saying it funny for now because when you're in that storyline, oh, this person is my father and they are older than me and maybe they do know better. As soon as you just think like how many silly, caught in their own world, old men are there in the world? There's quite a lot, you know?
Yeah.
You probably
Absolutely.
there's no one here that hasn't met their fair share of older people who think they know a lot better than what they actually do, but they don't, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like just because someone's your parent, there's like so many projections and limitations that come onto that. But if you can look at it from a neutral standpoint and see, well, if that was neutral, I didn't have any like emotional entanglement with this person, what they're saying doesn't make any sense. Just because they're older doesn't make any kind of justification for anything. If
Yeah,
anything, actually, with some, if you have more experience with something, in some ways it can shut you off to new perspectives because you think that your way is the way, right? So
yeah,
with her, what we had to do, what I had to explain is you don't need to over explain yourself. You don't need to be really intelligent. You don't need to really like put your point across in a way which makes something really easy to understand. You just have to say, no, this is what I'm feeling, and that's it. I'm not doing that. And you can say whatever you want. I'm not going to do that thing. Or this is not what I want. I'm just going to stay here, basically. And they're going to throw all of everything like the kitchen sink, guilt tripping, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter because if you don't give them anything, any space to like move in, then it's just a waste of time for them and they have to move out.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Did you have any clients like that?
You know what comes up for me as well when you're sharing this is if there's not just no space physically, but inside of you, and this is where we come back to the internal component,
Mm,
that's when it just like water off a duck's back. Because
mm,
often, especially in these family relationships or friendships, it's usually some kind of interject that keeps it sticky.
mm,
Where we've got some kind of guilt, or we're like maybe thinking, projecting that they're more intelligent than we are, they're more authority than we are. There's something in us that means that we become real small around them. We defer to them. We let let them decide, you know.
yeah.
And when I'm thinking of clients, one specifically for her with partners, it was often about really finding her own voice and not when someone is in their just natural expression, but maybe a little bit more of a on the light side domineering, right? They're just very forceful with their intention a little
Yeah.
bit, but not in a super harsh way. But they're just very expressive, but it's kind of very expressive and but not very reciprocal,
Right.
right? They're not like really listening that well. They're not harsh or mean, but they're just very much in their world. When someone's like that, and when she was being in just like reciprocity, support, like trying to navigate it and work with it, there are times where that can work, but actually in this case, it just kept leading to her not being heard, leading to her boundaries kind of being um, not represented or not listened to. And so it was actually like even re-owning a little bit of that abruptness, a little bit of that harshness at times,
Mm,
a little bit of that just like, I'm just gonna say it how it is.
yeah.
Right. And so that was for her, that was like a real empowerment because she'd been the collaborative person, which is a wonderful thing in so many situations. But in that situation, even in not a super harsh situation, but a situation where it's not the communication, there's something off here. She had to meet with that. And actually, because of her partner being a certain type on a disc model, this is a communication style, and he was a D, which is
Mm,
like the dominant style, which just means very like straightforward.
yeah.
It actually led to really good communication because it wasn't even seen as like her being harsh by him. It was just seen as from his side as her being clear,
Yeah.
right? Which for us agreeable people, me who's like so not a D in the disc
Yeah.
model, I'm like, that sounds crazy. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's just mean.
Yeah.
Like I can't
Yeah.
comprehend
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
for folks who are in the D part of a disc model, it can really feel like, oh, thank God you're just being direct and clear for me.
Yeah.
They feel relaxed and at ease, and it's like, cool, we can just speak a little bit like this.
Mm,
And of course, if it's your relationship, you have your preferences that may not be right for you. But in this situation, they wanted to be together and they were just weren't hearing each other.
mm,
And she started allowing that aspect of her to come through. And suddenly her boundaries were being listened to,
yeah.
right? And the communication style just emerged organically. She thought it was going to be way too harsh, but then it
Mm,
was really received,
yeah.
right? And sometimes we can't even see that or even think that's a possibility until we kind of let it come through organically.
Yeah.
And you know, in your words, like you said, going through a little bit of that resistance, sometimes it's not going to be super easy at the start,
No, it
which it
won't be.
wasn't.
Yeah.
But then she got that, like, oh, this actually worked pretty well. Even
Yeah.
if it didn't,
Yeah.
it's setting our boundaries is important. And just when we get that initial feedback, but it does go well, it's always a little bit easier
Yeah.
to keep going with that.
Do you think there's something, or first of all, I really like that. Is there something about boundaries and setting boundaries, internal or external, that we haven't spoken about that we're missing?
Mm. Yeah, I think one of them, and we've touched on this, but it is often in our own world, we'll use things like fairness
Mm,
and other sorts of moral, ethical things, but often it's a way of actually minimizing ourselves in a small
mm.
way.
Interesting.
Because
What do you
sometimes
mean?
we've learned that, like sometimes we've learned that if we use these words, it will make us like not get in trouble or not get punished. And
What do you
so
mean?
we're trying to, so I mean, actually, a great example has been so a client, every time they were getting into a argument,
Yeah.
right, they were always trying to navigate the ethics, fairness, and all of this stuff of the argument to check themselves because they didn't want to be bad. Right? It kind of comes back to what we were talking about at the start, but it all came from this construct of not wanting to be bad, not wanting to be punished that they had learned when they were growing up.
Mm,
You know, almost like they had had parents who, as parents do, would sometimes shout at them, be harsh to them,
yeah.
whatever it was. And sometimes it was just that that parent was um, emotional the day, right? It wasn't that they did anything wrong, but the language would be you've done something wrong. And so now they've learned if they use fairness, if they can just navigate the line of fairness, they're going to kind of be safe. They're going to be kind of okay. So they're always trying to navigate and find that line.
Mm,
But the reality was they just, once they let go of the idea that they were bad to begin with, they just got to just sit into their own boundary,
wow.
right? Instead of thinking, is this actually right? And doubting it the whole time. They just got to sit in it.
How did
Say,
that
this is
process
mine.
work for them?
Yeah, I mean, we had to really get past the fairness bit because it was sticky. Because
Right.
they kept getting in this loop of, is it fair? And they would almost look out, is it fair? Like looking for permission outside of them. You know, is this okay?
Mm,
And then we would got to the core seed and we got to see that not only had they taken on an introject that they were bad, but they had given away their moral authority to their parents.
yeah.
So we did a little swapperoo, gave the
Yeah.
introject back and took the projection of moral authority back to them. And what happened is they were able to just sit in that and sit in that moral authority, which emerged more into grace and emerged more into power as well. And they just felt like really secure in whatever boundaries and their actual needs and wants. Whereas before they'd been really shaky and wanting something or even discussing something. They felt like they had to be certain in every
Mm,
situation. And they were just, you know, having relationships, right? And having arguments or even just general discussions with their partner. There would be this subtle line of is this bad, is it good? So when that dropped away and they were able to just sit in their own moral authority, they just felt really solid.
mm,
And then when they were having disagreements, which was interesting, is they actually became a little bit more collaborative and agreeable because they were able to hear it without collapsing, right? Whereas before, any kind of twinge of they couldn't hear the other person because it was always in the language of fairness.
Mm,
Like, they were always trying to figure out if they had done something wrong.
yeah.
Whereas once that was gone, they were able to actually assess it almost more from the head rather than feeling that twinge in the heart, in the solar plexus. They were almost able to look at it like, "Oh, actually, yeah, you're kind of right about this. But when I look at it from this perspective, I think for us to grow together, this is probably going to be a better solution."
Mm,
Right? They were kind of able to operate from that place rather than just collapsing into if they're bad, if they're good, if they're this, they're that. And
mm.
so I think that's just an interesting thing that arises for me, but I'm curious if that kind of sparks anything on your end.
Well, what I was going to ask you about that is, so after they were able to have that breakthrough, what kind of changed for them in their life?
Yeah. The main thing is their relationship got a lot more solid in the sense that when they had disagreements, it wouldn't just spiral in that kind of 2.0, you're mad, I'm mad, we're both mad, and they would get really frustrated at each other.
Mm,
Instead, they were able to just really they weren't experiencing anger towards their partner, which meant when their partner came to them, often their partner wouldn't fall into anger themselves. They might begin with anger, but it would often just drop away real quick, and it would become a discussion where not only was the other partner heard, but they felt like the client felt like their internal world was safe. Like they didn't have to collapse just because the partner had a different point. And
interesting.
so what that just meant was not only were they able to hold their boundaries more, but they were actually able to solve a lot of disagreements because a disagreement was no longer a threat. And the relationship just did kind of better and better and better.
Yeah. That point of collapse is something which I saw in my own journey quite a lot, actually. Like, it's like you kind of tentatively set out a boundary and then the other person disagrees and you're just like, yeah, yeah, no, whatever. Yeah, it's cool. Right.
Yeah,
And it's almost like learning to stay in that resistance, because a
yeah,
lot of the time you think the other person is shutting you down. Really, the other person just doesn't have a problem sharing what they expect and their boundaries. And they're almost as surprised as you are that you're like, oh no, I'm not gonna, yeah, that you're right. And in some ways, they're actually kind of expecting you to set out your boundary. So a big part for me
yeah,
was learning to sit in that resistance, actually, and that
yeah,
uncomfortability until you just so used to it that it's not uncomfortable anymore. Like pure behavioral stuff, like not even an insecurity, but like purely just staying in the emotion and saying to yourself, it's almost like with the resolution that even if this doesn't work, it's still better than the old method because the old method really isn't working. It's almost like that kind of acceptance. Like I'm just going
yeah,
to let the chips fall where they may because I just know whatever I'm doing is not working.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Is anything else coming up for you?
No, I think that's a good place to finish.
Perfect. I have all of Cameron's links. Go and check him out. I can't recommend him enough. That's all from me.
For me, got all of Aaron's links down below. And if you feel called to go on this journey yourself or with one of us, please reach out and have a wonderful day.